I truly felt daunted at the prospect of writing about Vipin Vijay's The Image Threads, released in 2010. This film contains some of the most fascinating and complex subject matter for any film I have ever viewed. Right here is a film which, now 10 years old, feels ahead of its time. Vipin Vijay has been quite an active filmmaker since completing his diploma in 2000 at the Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute in Kolkata, West Bengal. This diploma was joined by a film titled The Egotic World, based on the Yoga Vasishta, an ancient philosophical Hindu text. 10 years on in the image threads, Vijay still composes films of a potent spiritual aura to them. This is a film which most beautifully articulates the digital age manifestations of traditional ideas relating to spiritual transcendence and non-corporeal divinity. Utilizing the metaphor of the internet to explore the concept of the world as appearance and the illusion of the individual, Vipin Vijay establishes himself very firmly as one of the most insightful not as one of the most insightful filmmakers alive, but also, frankly, of all time. I'm seriously considering whether a better film has been discussed so far on FOTD. I could consider this not only a 21st century equivalent to 1988's Omdar Bada, but one of its rather few artistic superiors. Vijay's screenplay and direction, realized via the photography of Shana Jalal, is one of the most profound experiences of my life, not only as a jealous artist, but as a human being, immersed, consumed, psychologically imprisoned by the digital age. I feel as though I have had a closed perspective on the cyberspace around us. An existence situated around computers might be a more organic evolution of our species' consciousness than we take for granted. Every haughty claim promised by all the enthusiastic spiritualists or New Age performers has found a material, observable validity within cyberspace. So what is the image threads actually about? I shall read aloud a detailed plot synopsis I noted had been posted to IMDb. An extremely rooted epic narrative, the image threads, where characters magically appear and disappear, sketching the world to three protagonists: Hari, a system analyst and a net hacker in his own terms, known under the nickname of Net Potato; his guru, teacher, black magician grandfather, the evil incarnate Kunjukatan Na; and the third vortex created by Ramani, Enchantress, the invisible lady with a scar, a vagabond, a liar, streetwalker, and a performer seated mostly on a wheelchair with a web portal of her own, who seeks people to come and watch her performance. All pieces of information on black magic and the essence of information technology world in this theme is Vent's mother. Staying back in the workplace at night, withdrawn and aloof, Hari, the central character, gradually gets into habitual peregrinations of self-abandonment through the boundless vistas of cyberspace. In homage to his grandfather, Hari conjures up or draws up a global force field of his tutelary deity, Varfali, an emanation of Kali in her harmful aspects, and calls it the worldwide zone of Varfali. But unlike the Varfali worshipped by his grandfather, her morphed image that Hari generated on the computer had the head of a boar and the body of a woman. Once, while playing around with the game of cosmic origin on the computer, there emerges a dame called Ramani. The acquaintance between Hari and Ramani warms up. The grandfather's notion on motion and that of plasma physics meet accidentally. Hari, who has been disturbed over the thought that the image of Ramani keeps changing every time she appears, demands that they meet in person, once. The doubt flits across his mind that the dame called Ramani, who makes her appearance on his computer monitor, could as well be an absurd accident programmed by somebody somewhere. Engrossed in thoughts about Ramani, Hari dreams her that night wheeling around her chair and dancing. Both Ramani's background and her location in the cyberspace remain as obscure to Hari as ever. Hari becomes apprehensive that Ramani leads a wanton and licentious life with other men, even as she consistently evades meeting or talking to him. Hari leaves for home to his village after having arrived at the conclusion that Ramani is the Cleopatra of virtual criminal instinct enthroned on a wheelchair. Once, when Kunjukatan Na was walking in the night through the forest, he sees one such seated on a swing and singing and musing to herself, in a mood of dalliance and flirtation. As he moves forward to catch hold of her, she flits away and jumps into a pond. Thus she goes on playing hide-and-seek for 6 days and nights on end, in 6 ponds one after the other, as fish and as mud, before Kunjukatan Na could finally lay his hands on her. He takes her captive in magical spell and leaves her in subjugation to Varfali, the goddess. Suddenly he has a vision that Varfali, with drawn sword, is asking for blood sacrifice to propitiate her. Recognizing the premonitions of impending death, it dawns on him that it is himself who has to be offered as sacrifice. Meditating Varfali, the goddess, intently, he plunges the sword in his navel. He draws out the sword and slashes his penis that was in erection out of mortal fear and offers it as sacrifice before Varfali. Wow. Thank you, whoever had the generosity to upload this. Critic Dustin Chang wrote about the image threads around the time of its release. What better country to make a film about the internet age than India, the largest IT labor exporting country? This serene visual contemplation on the nature of the virtual world and finding one's identity, and it starts with an ironic quote, "I had a dream about reality. It was such a relief to wake up," by a Polish aphorist Stanislaw J. Lech, which sets the tone of the image threads. An IT professor named Hari, pimping, in his own words, the information technology laborers to the US and Europe, narrates most of the film in philosophical monologue. He sometimes engages in conversations online with a virtual persona who might be either a sultry female model or a man in a miniskirt or both. Other times he recalls his black magic priest grandfather. At one point, parallels are drawn between internet virus and the plague by a girl seductively treading around him, singing the nursery rhyme Ring Around the Rosie. But the film's languid pace and beauty betrays the ominous subject. Shot in exotic Kerala locale, the film is nothing short of stunning. Water-stained walls, rusty water pipes, vegetation-infused houses, ancient temples, lush jungles, dark caves, bearded yogis, beautiful girls in colourful costumes, sleek gizmos, wires, lights, and Wikipedia, all vying for your attention. Every frame is a work of art. Director Vipin Vijay and his cinematographer Shernard Jalal often distinguish, then blur, the boundaries between the past and present, technology and nature, reality and fantasy, tangible and intangible. Devoid of any visible narrative, the image thread is unlike any film I've ever seen. It is more like a visual essay than a film. To enjoy it, you have to give in to its luscious visuals to wash over you. Calming and hypnotic, it's literally the best films to meditate on. I spoke that as is. That's not me misreading anything. Adam Furkan wrote a tremendous piece about this film for his energy clearing blog. I shall read it aloud here, as well as link it in the description. After watching the avant-garde Malayalam film Chitra Sutram by Vipin Vijay, that's its original title, I felt it perfectly defined the concept of Pitra Karma, a genetic curse carried across generations until the protagonist provides salvation and resolution. I wrote an analytical review on it. Yes, let's read it. Deleuze, in his Difference and Repetition, states, "Difference allows us to pass from one order of repetition to another and from one generality/modality to another." In Chitra Sutram, the difference in spatio-temporal time zones between netizen Hari and his black magician grandfather enables the faithful repetition, reenactment of the genealogical curse, ancestral karmic residue, of phallic castration at the feet of illusion incarnate. It is sheer external phenotypal difference that enables to faithfully reenact internal and genotypic repetition. The more things change on the outside, more they stay the same inside. The parallel backdrops of information networking and black magic are entwined to symbolic abstract planes where the universal meta-narrative storyline unfolds. The image threads basically explores the metaphysical discourse of the image, its politics, dialectics, deconstruction, and proliferation. The initial birth of the image in the primordial human condition as a signifier of the conceptual, the sacred, the abstract, and the extrapolation of image in the cyber age into simulacra, virtual avatars, cyber simulations, image becoming more real than the actual. In the scene showing a parade/float of robotic apparitions depicting religious scenes, mechanically simulated mythic icons, the first machinistic inception of simulacra unfolds. From that primitive beginning of stumbling pre-programmed mechanical movements, simulation exponentially transgresses into the realm of virtual reality. No longer mechanically limited/grotesque, but the world of the infinite imaginary imagery, seamlessly, electronically exchanged. A cybernetic reality more powerful and efficient than the real. The transformation of image into virtual avatars. The voyeuristic obsessive domain of role-playing and virtual interaction. The role-playing taking over the player. The signifier taking over the signified. The mask becoming more real than the hidden face. From the first scene, Hari is shown on the quest of selecting a perfect image for his desktop. He contemplates about the sacred four corners of the frame. In front of his class of networking students, he declares, "It's a miracle what happens on the screen." For him, the digital image is the divine, cybernetic representation, the sublime. He stoically introduces himself as a network trainer, a pimp for expert information technology labor. He is comfortable with his cynical self-image, his chosen profession. But at night he becomes a cyber black magician, seeking magical secrets in virtual reality. He initiates a cyber love affair with unknown Ramani. He creates a virtual avatar of the goddess Varfali, the iconification of their online love. Romani questions Hari's habit of playing curtsy to his grandfather before each interaction. Hari responds that he and his grandfather are the same person, existent in different time zones. For him, virtual reality and black magic is one and the same process, a form of higher informational technology that requires belief. Hari compares his grandfather to scientist mathematician Claude Elwood Shannon, the father of information theory. He believes his grandfather's ritual programming through genetic lineage has enabled him to transcend the information superhighway and enter the realm of black magic. His ancestry destines him to be a self-proclaimed Prince of Darkness in the virtual realm. Romani declares her love for the virtual prince. For Romani, the internet provides the ideal medium for interaction. Its perfect anonymity enables interaction of absolute strangers in hyperspace, the precondition of absolute distance providing the safety/convenience of for absolute intimacy. Initially, she rejects Hari as the database of her acquaintance list is full, yet she is open to acquaint herself with Hari. Because they share no common interests, it's the detachment of virtual anonymity that enables Romani to share her intimacy with Hari. Her shattered dreams, secret hopes, deepest personal disappointments, and background of chronic hysteria, visceral trauma, childhood scars, and adult disillusionment shared in seamless digital anonymity and efficacy. The physical consummation of Hari and Romani's cyber affair takes place in the domain of pure light. Surrounded by a neon net, she lies on a bed of light and makes love to a phallus-shaped light tube, perfectly depictive of the erotic mechanics of cyber sex. Where the phallic light rays from the screen penetrate the vulva of our retina, simulating our cortex, the mechanics of simulated optical intercourse. Wonderful. The first foray into taboo. The prohibited begins with the sorcerer's visit of Valafuza village for tutorage under his prodigal uncle for medicine and magic. He sleeps with his guru's wife, steals his uncle's magical secrets, and caught red-handed, kills his own uncle, his teacher. In his dying breath, his uncle curses him with the prophecy of his destruction through sleeping with a hermaphrodite. In Hari's life, the curse manifests as a cyber love affair for hermaphrodite who calls himself Sweetheart and disguises himself a girl. Sweetheart and Hari interact in a bizarre, machinistic, cyberreal sex, convoluted perversion of role-playing, sexual simulation by fax machines, body as an extension into machines, the realm of Cronenberg's body simulation. After Sweetheart, Hari attempts to violate his virtual taboo with Romani, the taboo of anonymity. He asks about Romani's wheelchair, attempting to remove the veil of mystery between them. The inviolable condition of secrecy, vital in virtual role-playing, is shattered. Romani reminds him that this very veil of secrecy enables their virtual love affair to exist. The vital veil of separation that separates the signifier and signified, image and actual. The attempt of removal signals the end of their virtual relationship. Disillusioned, Hari attempts to regresses by plunging into the annals primitive information sharing, basic printing books, churning out pulp fiction, the linear narrative of the detective pulp thriller sprinkled with basic erotic fantasies, the dissemination of image and information at the lowest basic level, the sincerity of the pulp. Hari's post-orgasmic chill, withdrawal into the ruin of his abandoned house, his mentally challenged cousin stuck in her infantile world of dreams, repetition of Ringa-Ranga roses, pocketful of posies, originally a term denoted in the 18th century England to depict the symptom of Black Death, the plague, now transmitted across the ages in the death chill of an innocuous children's rhyme, the serpentine trickery of communication and misrepresentation, the politics of simulacra and the signifier. Kunjakatan seeks now to escape from the endless bondage of desire. He now aims for the most fearful of his magical ambitions, direct physical communion with the goddess Varfali. Finally finding her in a muddy pond, he drags her out and freezes her into a statue, and finally castrates himself at the feet of the goddess. Phallocentric castration is the only means of liberation from the bondage of the signifier/role-playing. Hari frantically attempts to make a direct contact with Romani. She responds that he exists for her merely as a sign, signifier, a virtual symbol. She has already replaced Hari with a new cyber lover. Her parting ways to Hari, I want to exit your life, like a mere shadow, assuaging the ethereal temporality transience of their torrid cyber interaction. Standing on a pile of discarded dolls, her uncountable abandoned avatars, Romani finally severs the umbilical cyber cord between her and Hari, bringing an end to the assemblage cyber construct for desire machine between them, the violent breakdown of a virtual love, leaving only residues of molten plastic, synthetic waste, and burnt-out circuitry. Realization dawns on Hari in the grounds of a semi-submerged, forgotten, abandoned stone monastery. 3 wise men gather and announce, "For the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter it by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few." Hari abandons his electronic apparatus, his clothes, his trappings, and cleanses himself in a holy bath in a lonely riverbank. Finally, he enters a primitive photo studio with ancient box camera and freezes his image into a narrow limited confine of a standard passport photograph. In the narrow limitation of his image lays his means of liberation. In Vedic cosmology, Rahu Ketu represents the 2 nodes. Rahu stands for ultra-wide / visionary / surreal virtuality, and Ketu stands for the narrow / hard / obscure way of redemption, sacrifice, and eventual liberation. Broadly, Rahu embodies desire, power, projection, and Ketu signifies wisdom, renunciation, liberation. Rahu ensnares by mass media hysteria of consumerism, but Ketu liberates in the silence of narrow, renunciated reflection. In the world of illusions, finally Hari chooses Ketu over Rahu, his release from the genetic curse. The movie explores the meta-narrative of cyclicity. Whereas opposed to linear evolution, things move in repetitive cyclic patterns. The high-speed, unrestricted information superhighway ultimately falls prey to its own porn and creation in form of a virus. In the end, fantastic progress succumbs to the fruits of its own creation. A natural consequence is illustrated in Baudrillard's theorem of accursed share, where every technological progressive move is irrevocably accompanied by an equivalent regressive loss. Cyber simulation definitely allows infinite freedom, role-playing, unlimited avatars, but are they capable of sustaining the euphoria of cybernetic desire? Simulacra here is not blatantly restricted to the net, but the very basic interactions between beings, misrepresentation at the cost of speed, ecstatic rupture of access and information as discussed in the theories of Baudrillard, Paul Virilio. Technology is a fantastic, irrefutable convenience, but can the physical karma of mortality be so easily transgressed? Are we capacitated to transcend genetics, genealogy, for DNA coding so conveniently? In order to infuse ourselves with global neutrality and virtue and freedom of virtuality promised by the cyberreal? In the end, it is we who limit ourselves. Like the ultra-virtual hermaphrodite sweetheart finally finding middle-class Hari's machinistic fantasies and obsession too hard an act to swallow, such is the rule of paradox/irony. Difference is the irrevocable foundation and cause of repetition. Familiarity is the vital condition for radical exoticism, the painfully inconvenient and arduous process of image creation, as opposed to the convenient mass proliferation. Despite all its surreal, psychedelic, avant-garde incorporations, the image threads ultimately explores Pitri karma, the ancestral karma/deed/curse carried across generations, an eternal karmic deed faithfully reenacted across time, and the ultimate resolution only occurring by enlightenment, liberation of the protagonist, ultimately drawing to a close for dramatic genetic reenactment across generations and time spans. There we go. A film which inspires such thoughts is an invaluable film, and yet 10 years on I still feel as though the image threads is in a class of its own. I am not yet familiar with Vijay's filmography post-2010, although perhaps he has continued creating utter masterworks pertaining to the uncertainty of instinctive perception, the frightening relevance of apparently religious thinking, and the limits, if any, to our present moment. The image threads might be the best film of the century so far. I would just like to share a few words complimentary and descriptive of the film's cinematography and its general technical composition. I really admired the way in which there is no distinction between the heavily lit grandeur staged for shooting religious iconography and for contemporary urban environments. It continually emphasizes the idea that time, being cyclical or even infinitely occurring in the exact same space, has never moved away from the Vedic era, the age of magnificence and wonder prescribed to myths written down in the likes of the Mahabharata. Everything has come full circle within the cultures of the Indian subcontinent. This film visually enunciates that our current world is the very one promised by Sanskrit texts. That digitally cosmic psychedelia we kept expecting to arrive is the world we are living in now. Together with the philosophy of editing which reminds the viewer of modern browsing, thanks must be given to credited editor Deb Kamal Ganguly, Shernad Jalal's photography penetrates the psyche of an intensive internet user, that is, most of us, right? Also potently interesting is its use of CGI to create idle iconography in order to anthropomorphize aspects of digital communication technology, much as the old gods had been for analog or organic methods of communication, or general facets of human existence in the natural world. On the actual photography, I love how everything, and I mean everything, is lavishly lit. Even artificial objects have a hyperreal glow about them, as though their being human creations, evidence of intellectual accomplishment, renders them partially divine. This is to say, modern urban locales are given the photovisual sanctity normally awarded to only the most ancient, most contemporaneous to the lost era of the Vedas, of human structures, temples, that sort of thing. Anyway, I think that's everything I wanted to share about 2010's The Image Threads, directed by Vipin Vijay. Possibly the greatest film ever made, or whatever. Have a great day, everyone.